In this exercise, we're going to go over how to add metadata to different Stripe objects. In the example, we'll focus on customers, but the same process holds true for any Stripe object that supports metadata. The first action I'm doing here is I'm actually getting the Stripe account record. I'm doing that just by simply saying look for Stripe accounts, and then I'm looking for Stripe account ID, and I'm actually passing in the account ID that I'm concerned about or looking up. It's my test account, so I only have one account here, but show how you can actually query and get the right account that you want to work with. Once we have our account looked up, we simply just do a couple of assignments here. So we want to pass an assignment. For this, I'm just going to say customer metadata string list. And then what we want to do is we want to grab a variable here, and what we're going to call this is, we'll call it customer string data. And then for the data type, we want to pass an apex defined. So the way metadata works is metadata itself is a generic construct inside of a class, and then that class has what we call list additional strings, and that list additional strings expects a list of additional strings to pass in, and those strings are made up of key value pairs. So what we want to do is we want to grab the individual piece of these so you can see additional string an additional string list. The additional string list is what actually exists inside of the metadata, but what we want to create is an additional string for each metadata that we want to pass. For each metadata key value pair we want to pass. So I'll just click done now that I have that set. And then here inside of that variable we want to do an assignment, we want to say dot key, and now all of a sudden we're saying, okay, customer string data key, and I'm going to say our new demo is going to be the key, and then I'm going to pass another assignment here for customer string data dot value, and for this one I'm going to say our demo value. So what we should do when we pass this is we'll see new metadata on the customer saying our new demo and our new demo value. So we've created this this additional string, and what we're going to do is then pass this into a metadata variable. So we're going to do another assignment here, and in this assignment we're just going to say metadata set, and we'll create another variable. And for here what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable for metadata. So I'm just going to call it customer meta. And then for the data type, again, it's apex defined, and what we're looking for here is metadata. So if you simply search for metadata, you'll see the stripe gc underscore metadata. Go ahead and then click done. And then this, for the metadata, we actually wanted to get into the subtype of the list additional string fields. And then the operator here, we want to say add. So we're adding into the array of this to set those different values. You could pass multiple values here, assuming maybe you want to set 5 or 6 different types of metadata. You could, and you would use a very similar process. I grabbed the wrong variable. Now that we can grab the right variable, it's customer string data, and then we're going to pass the customer string data into this array, basically. So what we're saying is for this additional string, pass it into this list additional string array. And this is how we would add more than one. So imagine we had customer string data 2. Maybe we would say again, for the customer metadata, we would then do another add operation. And then we would just say add, and then we put in another additional string values that we'd populated, yet another key value pair we could pass in here if we wanted to set more than one value. In this case, we're only going to set one. We're going to go ahead and say done. Now that we have assigned a metadata or a metadata variable, now we can pass that metadata variable into any action where metadata is allowed. So in this case, I'm just going to do an update customer. And I'm going to say set metadata. For the customer value, I have a customer here I'm working with, Jane Doe in my test account. You can see there's a couple values already in the metadata right here. I'm just going to copy out the customer ID. I'm going to navigate back to my flow. I'm going to paste that customer ID in here. Obviously, we can pull that from different ways or fetch the customer ID some other way. But in this case, we're just hard coding the value. And then for the Stripe account ID, as I mentioned, we have a get Stripe account here, and we're passing in the record ID. Important to note, it's the record ID, not the Stripe ID that's also in here. It's just the record ID. Now that I've passed in the record ID, I'm just going to scroll down the metadata. I must have passed it. There it is. There's the metadata. I'm going to go ahead and say include. And then I'm going to pass in that customer metadata that we defined in that assignment as the value I want there. I'm simply going to say done. And now I have a flow that will actually set the metadata here. I'm going to go ahead and save this flow. I'm going to ignore the warning, and then I'm just going to go ahead and say debug, and when this runs, it'll actually set the value inside the customer. So I'm going to say debug. This is using the asynchronous pass since we are making a call out. I can't remember what start conditions I have on this, so I'm just going to say ignore them. And for the Stripe account ID, I'm just going to look one up real quick and say run. Now we can see if this flow is executed, we can actually open up the Stripe action. You'll see generic errors here. Basically what these errors are is saying it can't render the string because it's not actually string. So you're seeing these inputs, but that's not string, it's an actual object. So you're going to see these for any sort of object. You'll see a couple others here as well. You can ignore those. The call out itself was successful. It's just it had an error rendering some of the returns that weren't necessarily string that it was trying to show a string. But if we go into the customer, we can see these two metadata fields, and when I refresh, I should have one additional. I can see our demo and our demo value. So this shows how we can easily set metadata inside. There are a couple variable assignments we have to do, but that's because when we bring in the Stripe objects and classes into Salesforce, it does create more of a type of class-based programming to where we're setting a subclass, and then we're populating that subclass into a class that an input's expecting, in this case metadata. But this gives an example of how to do that. Thank you.